I think it's time for a change. I think the Seahawks need fresh ideas from the top. I think it's gone stale. I think a new approach is required. Generally, I'm very much in the camp that nothing lasts forever. And this is not me saying that I dislike Pete Carroll or that I don't respect him or that I don't massively appreciate him or don't respect everything that he's done. And I also respect the things that he still produces for the Seahawks today, which is a culture which seems to be unmatched. And the energy and the positivity that he provides and the obvious motivational quality, I think, is a benefit to the Seahawks. And I'm not for a second suggesting that he is totally useless and needs to get out now and that he is completely 100% holding the Seahawks back. But I think it's time for a change. You are a team that is predicated on the fact that you have a franchise quarterback who is earning $35 million a year. And if you wish to have Russell Wilson on your team for the long, long term, not just for the rest of his contract or not just for this year and next or even just this year, then you're going to have to pay him even more because you've seen the contracts that are being dished out to people like Josh Allen and stuff like that. So for me, the direction of this team is no longer the all compete. We're going to be a balanced running team and we're going to play the Pete Carroll. The team ultimately has to be structured around your quarterback now because that is where you're investing so much of your money. And part of the reason that he was kicking off a few months ago is because I don't think that he believes that, whatever Pete Carroll's vision is chimes with his vision. And I think that you need the head coach and the quarterback moving forward to share that vision. I think the best thing for the Seahawks moving forward because it's not going to happen this year, but from next year onwards, assuming that this is more the same this year, which is what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be an 10, 11, 12 win season. We've discussed, Robbie. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. I think it could easily be another early playoff defeat. And I think that what you need to create in Seattle is the same kind of relationship that they have in Kansas City with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, where you have very much a hands-on, offensive-minded head coach with a vision which is creative, which chimes with his quarterback, and you never hear of any issues between Reid and Mahomes. And ultimately, I think that is what the Seahawks need because that's where they've made their investment with Russell Wilson. And if you want to keep Russell Wilson, then that to me is the direction this franchise is going to have to go. And then anything other than winning the Super Bowl or making a serious tilt for the Super Bowl, I think that what you're going to find in the offseason is that Russell Wilson's going to do act 2 of what he did this year, which is to agitate for change or agitate for a trade. Because this is a man who is approaching his mid-30s and knows that time is of the essence. He needs to win now. And I worry a little bit that what we're sort of experiencing right now is just the prolonging of something that has gone stale, that has become the Wilson and the Carroll relationship is a little bit out of date now. And I think it's just time to move on. And look, people will go, well, who would you have then? Who would you have? Who would you bring in? Give us some names. Who is this magical coach who comes in and has this brilliant relationship? But I've got some names. I'm not for a second saying that these names are perfect, Robbie, but these are the names that I think of when I'm talking about this. Brian Daboll in Buffalo. Brian Daboll is the man responsible for turning Josh Allen from a pumpkin into the Cinderella's carriage. He was unbelievable last year. I mean, he was practically unrecognizable. And the game design week to week in Buffalo, like the Seahawks, listen to Carroll after that Buffalo game. We thought they were going to run the ball a lot. They didn't run the ball at all. Like literally never. And in the first half, did they run the ball once? Like it was just throw. And the Seahawks like, what are they doing? Wow, we didn't expect that. And that's Daboll. I'm not saying he's perfect. In the games when they played the Chiefs, I don't think they really had an angle on that. But I like the fact that he's elevated Allen. I like the fact that he game plans specifically. I like the way that he's getting so much out of Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. He's making the most of those parts. He's a coach that has been around and worked with different people. I'd be interested to see how a guy like that would work with Russell Wilson. I'd be interested to see I'm intrigued to see how Joe Brady gets on as the offensive coordinator in Carolina again this year because of what he did at LSU. Look at LSU right now. They lost to UCLA. Like Joe Brady goes in there with Joe Burrow and those pieces. It turns them into the unstoppable force that they became. And look, I like Ed Orgeron. He seems quite an interesting guy. I don't think anyone could point at Ed Orgeron and go, wow, that is the man who was completely responsible for that because he's still there. And look what they've been for the last year and a bit. Joe Brady was incredible there, and I think he did a good job with Carolina last year. He's moved them along slightly with Sam Darnold now. Let's see what he can do. to even get a song out of him. He's somebody that I'd be interested to see the Seahawks. And he's got sort of that Sean Payton style offense going on. And that's something that Russell Wilson has always seemed to have a lot of interest in. And then, there's the obvious sort of college candidates, your Lincoln Rileys and people like Matt Campbell who get talked about, who've been very creative, very innovative. And just this, my personal opinion, Robbie, I'd quite like to see a coach like that operate with Russell Wilson and those two be kind of like that and see how that works. And that's nothing against Pete Carroll. I think it's great. He brought a title to Seattle. I just think it's time to go in a different direction. And look, the counter argument to this, Robbie, is always, and people get very, very sniffy about this, and they always push back with the same thing. The Seahawks are consistent winners in the regular season. They've done this in the regular season. They got 12 wins last year, and it was like 11 wins the year before, and 10 wins before that. They've never been under 500 since the draft in Russell Wilson. And I was alive in the 80s, and the Seahawks were crap. And the Seahawks sucked, and the Seahawks were really bad in the 90s. And then it was not, I remember what it was like. If Pete goes, it'll probably go back to how it was then. I just think, looking at the past to justify decision-making in the future is just a backwards way of doing things. Because the Seahawks are no longer the franchise they were in the 80s and the 90s. Paul Allen changed that forever. Mike Holmgren got them to a Super Bowl. All right, Holmgren's not been as consistently great as Carroll has in terms of winning, but Holmgren never had Russell Wilson. No disrespect to Matt Hasselbeck, he ain't Russ. So you look at the regular season records, and the 2 points that I'd make on this is, what would the regular season, I think Russell Wilson's responsible for the regular season records more so than Pete Carroll. I think without Russell Wilson, you ain't getting those 9, 10, 11, 12 win seasons. You're just not. And people say, well, what about last year? They got 12 wins and Russell was crap for the second half of the year. Yeah, but they were 7-4, 7-5, I think, if you include the playoff game against the Rams at the end of the year. They were practically a 500 team by the end of the season. The reason they got to 12 wins is because they started 5-0, because despite having the worst defense, one of the worst defenses in NFL history in the first 5 games, they were 5-0 because Russell Wilson was on a record-setting pace himself. So it's Russell Wilson. And if you make the change and Russell Wilson's still there, I don't see any reason why the Seahawks would regress massively because Pete Carroll isn't there. So I'm willing to take a chance on a different approach moving forward with a coach and a quarterback that are offensive-minded, that share a vision, Robbie, to see how it goes and take that chance and to say, Pete, I love everything that you've done, but I think this is the direction it has to go. And I don't think that anything is going to happen this year that will make me change my opinion. So that me and you are having a conversation in January, Robbie, and I'm saying that I got this wrong and I'm feeling differently and I want Pete Carroll to stay for years to come. I think that it is time for that conversation. Now, I say all this knowing full well, Robbie, and the talk is coming to an end, I promise. I say this knowing that this ain't going to happen because this is a marriage of convenience for this franchise. This franchise is in a holding pattern. They don't have an owner who I think is going to be committed to this for years. I think it's about a period of time before a new owner comes in. It's convenient for them to hand the keys to Pete Carroll. I think that they are just kind of you deal with this. You deal with the football side of things. And that's what happened. And I think they trust Carroll and Schneider to do that. But that's no good for the Seahawks, in my opinion. And I think there's no excuse to not make a big decision. And I think maybe Carroll should make it himself if they won't. Because for me, having the Seahawks are way past regular season wins. Woohoo! No, they need to be, what are you doing in the playoffs? The playoff record ain't good enough. It hasn't been good enough in the last few years. And while some fans who remember the 80s might be warmed and comforted by another 9, 10, 11, 12 win season and an early playoff exit, I do not think that is going to be good enough for your quarterback. And if he takes the leave again, there is no way that you can justify trading Russell Wilson rather than changing your coach. That's my opinion. I don't think anything's going to happen to change my view come the end of the season. And I think if that happens, I fear that Russell Wilson will say, I'm out. And I think this is when the fan base's opinion may change a little bit here. Because if you ask fans to choose between Carroll and Wilson, it will get ugly. And it will become an issue. And it will put fans in a very uncomfortable position. I do not see any way whatsoever that this team can make the playoffs and have an early exit again in the playoffs and survive with that relationship intact, with Russell going, okay, on to next year. I can't see that.
No, I agree.
Cannot see that.
No, I agree.
And that's going to be a big problem for them. And that's why I suggest other names. And I just think it's time. And the development of players hasn't been good enough, Robbie. The roster construction hasn't been good enough. The game management hasn't been good enough. The winning the big moments hasn't been good enough. They lose the big playoff games that they need to win. They haven't shown that they can take that next step. And rather than live in fear of, oh my word, if we change it, we might go back to being a crappy franchise, I think it's time to roll the dice on becoming a championship franchise again. And I don't think the current organization is going to do it. And it's not even that they're mediocre. They're just good, not great. It does frustrate me, though, when I hear people reference the 80s and 90s, and Robbie, it comes up so many times. Oh, you can't possibly make a change. You can't do this because it was bad. It'll go back to being bad. No, I think with Russell Wilson on the roster, there's like a base level. And I think it's probably 9 wins because that's the worst season he's ever had. And the worst season that he ever had with 9 wins, the team was decimated with injuries and all sorts of bloody issues. And they couldn't run the ball at all.
He was injured.
Yeah, so you've got all sorts of issues combined in there, and they still got to 9 wins. And even when he has a really difficult end to last season, and listen, I don't think he has that bad end to the season, Robbie, with a very creative-minded offensive head coach running the scheme, because that was just so predictable. I mean, you saw we had Joe Fan on a stream, and we talked about the question he asked after the Washington game where they couldn't do anything on third down and the offense was stale. And what are you doing about it? And Pete's brushing it off, going, well, you guys can make a big deal about it if you want. We're not worried about it. And then about 2-3 weeks later, they're out of the playoffs because of the same issue that they didn't address. And, I don't think Russell Wilson has the second half of last season with a different offensive mind running the controls. And I think what I'd love to see, and I just think to give it a chance, Robbie, because you're only going to get one crack at the Russell Wilson era. You're only going to get one go at this. Okay. So I don't want to look back on this era of, I kind of already feel like I'm looking back on the Pete Carroll era was good, but could have been better because of that last Super Bowl, because of what happened at the end of that and not being able to get back there. I don't want to look back on the Russell Wilson era and think, well, that was the same thing. Could have been better. Could have been more. Because, Drew Brees, he's broke records, done all that, 1 Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers, done all that, 1 Super Bowl. I don't want to look back and have that. Just another 1 Super Bowl for Russell Wilson changes everything. And I just would be very interested to see a Darboll type with Russ, or a Brady type with a very experienced specialist defensive coordinator coming in who is given the keys to be a defensive coordinator. To me, that would be a fascinating and exciting situation to go into 2022 with if this season ends up being more than the same. If it doesn't, Robbie, and I'm not even saying if they win the Super Bowl, if they get to the NFC Championship game and put up a real fight in that game but lose, I will eat my words that I have said here, and I will come back on a stream, and you know it, and people know. I write a post every year saying it's listing the things I've got wrong in the draft. Every year, without fail.
People don't read that. They only remember the negative.
I'm not someone who acts like I've got all the answers. I have opinions, and when they're wrong, I will happily come back and say that they are wrong. I've got an issue with this. If the Seahawks get to the NFC Championship game and I am wrong, I will happily come on here and I'll write a post about it saying I was so wrong. I've got this so wrong. Pete, I apologize for ever doubting you. I will do all of those things. I promise I will. It's on video now. I'm saying it right now. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think at the end of the year, what we'll actually be doing is looking back on this and going, everything still stands. And we'll be left in this situation of wondering what will happen, because I think that is when the Russell Wilson situation comes back up. Because unless Pete goes, I've had enough. I don't think and trust me, I wouldn't even trust the franchise, Robbie, to make the right appointment, because I think ownership is in that holding pattern right now. I don't know. How could you make a projection on whether Jody Allen and Chuck Arnold, how could you make an assessment on whether they're capable of appointing a great head coach? They've never had to do it. Unless they go and get Todd Lywicki back or somebody like to come and just do that job, which wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, then I don't know how you can have any faith either way, either they will get it right or wrong. So that's just what I'm saying. I don't like talking in this way, Robbie. I know there's going to be a lot of people who hate. I can I know what the comments are going to be on this video. I know what the comments are going to be on other websites and the emails that I'm going to get for saying this. I know it's completely blasphemous to criticize Pete, but I want to say it now and get it out of the way rather than just be saying it 4 or 5 weeks in and acting like I'm too clever by half.
Right.